Welcome to the Private Equity Exchange 2007, the only summit bridging the gaps between limited partners, private equity funds, corporate executives, and entrepreneurs. The Private Equity Exchange is the only venue where LPs, private equity firms, corporate executives, and entrepreneurs meet, enabling them to move quickly from ideas to deal crafting. The Private Equity Exchange, the largest private equity event in Europe for CEOs, funds, and LPs. Restructuring, crisis management.
My approach today to dealing with crisis management is from a private equity investor point of view. I think we'll all have different insights, so it should be interesting for you to try and spot the differences. As a brief introduction, because I have to do my own publicité and advertise Sun Capital a bit, in 2 minutes. Sun Capital is a global private equity fund with $10 billion under management, focused on doing only turnarounds. So all we do, all day, every day, 40 times a year, is make acquisitions of companies that are underperforming. And underperforming can mean different things to different people, but is always in some state of crisis. We'll buy companies ranking from a 1 out of 10 in terms of financial performance, which is liquidation, Chapter 11, a few days away from complete insolvency, all the way to buying companies which are 7 out of 10. And 7 out of 10 is a company that's doing okay, that's making a positive cash flow, but perhaps not as much as it should be. And the key, obviously, in a good investment strategy in the turnaround world is finding a company that needs to exist. Buying a bad company that's in trouble is not a good deal. And so, obviously, we try and focus on the good companies which are going through some elements of crisis. What does that mean? That means that about half of the companies that we buy are EBITDA negative. So it's always a turnaround, it's always an underperformer, it's always a special situation for us. We've been doing it for about 12 years. We have 160 people in 6 offices worldwide. We've done, I think, close to 35 acquisitions this year. We did 33 last year. So all we do is look for companies that are underperforming. And what we very often find is the management teams of these companies have failed to deal with a change in an industry or in a company. And what we try and bring, and what every good turnaround investor or turnaround advisor tries to bring, is the tools to that company to adapt to change. There's a few things you need to do and you need to have when you're operating in our market. And again, I'm going to do a bit of advertising. You need to be very quick and very decisive. We do most of our deals in 30 days. In the turnaround crisis world, you can't afford to spend 6 months on due diligence of a portfolio company, because in 6 months' time the target may not be there. So you need to be very decisive and very quick in your actions. We also have the added luxury that we have the capability and the capacity to bridge our own transactions, which means that unlike most private equity funds who will make offers with financing contingencies in them, again, the advantage in a turnaround world is to be able to say to the seller, we're going to move quickly and we have the money in our pockets, and we can get the deal done and bridge the entire transaction. The way we deal with turning around our portfolio companies, unlike I think most of our competitors, is we have 30 in-house operating professionals. These are guys with more grey hair than I have, with 30 years of operational experience, ex-CEOs, CFOs, CEOs, and they have been through many storms and can help the management of the portfolio companies act through the crisis. So in essence, I'll come back to this one, we're a little bit of a mix of a private equity firm, a crisis manager, and an operating management firm. My job is I'm a deal guy. I find the deal, I do the transaction, I negotiate the deal, I finance it, I document it. But thankfully I have these operating partners who help me to actually put in place a turnaround and work with the management teams. So we operate, we think, in the little blue circle, which is where any turnaround investor needs to be very operationally involved with his portfolio. Briefly, our track record. if you look at the bottom right, what you'll see is our first 3 funds, Sun Capital Partners 1, 2, 3. You'll see out of those 3 funds, we bought 64 portfolio companies, 30 of which were EBITDA negative at the time of acquisition. In aggregate, those 64 portfolio companies made 28 million of EBITDA. When we sold them, or if we still own them today, those 64 companies are making close to 600 million of EBITDA. Same thing for funds 1, 2, and 3. So that's the track record, and that's what we do. We buy companies that show big signs for operational improvements.
Let me give you very briefly the situation of crisis, which was not at all a financial crisis, but management and industrial crisis in the case of Bartoma. Where we can go up and down. Here? No.
Spacebar.
Spacebar, okay. Phase 1, Bartoma was in bankruptcy. So AlixPartners designed a plan de cession for the investor Silver Point to take over the French and Polish operation of CF Goma, which was Bartoma, in fact. Bartoma is a spin-off of PSA and was sold from PSA to CF Goma in 2000 and was in insolvency in 2005. It's a company which is a tier 1 supplier in automotive sector, rubber products, anti-vibration, low pressure houses, body sealing, and it was insolvency in 2005, low OEM volumes, so a real operational crisis, many projects lost from 2003 to 2005, so a very low pipeline of projects, very low top line, and most of the cash was spent during the CF Goma years for other purpose than investing for the future. So, and probably last but not least, a strong dependence to PSA even after 5 years. So, a very tough situation, EBITDA negative in 2005. So AlixPartners had to prepare a business plan revisiting all the aspects of the economics of the Bartoma. So the actions taken, I will not comment in details, but mainly identifying all the possible improvement for the operations. So at the end of the day, AlixPartners prepares a business plan supporting the client offer to the court, and the main points is that Silver Point was very well positioning in front of the stakeholders at that moment, the customers, the internal workers, everybody around the company.
And bear in mind, I forgot to introduce that obviously when we chose this case study, it's A, because it's Alex, and B, because the supplier industry as a whole is in the auto industry is in really a big shakeout. So by analogy, with the rest of the industry, it lays interesting lessons, but beyond this industry analogy, you can find data points and solution, whatever industry you want to restructure.
Yeah, thank you. The phase 2 was a court decision. It was a very tough battle between the plan de cession and the plan de continuation, and we had to face some difficulties like an IT war between the Bartoma and the previous shareholder, communication war, and at the end the court decision was in favor of the plan de cession. And we began July 12, 2006 to manage the company. So Silver Point asked AlixPartners to continue its job, which means to manage the company with the CEO, myself, and different specific position as like a purchasing director and other positions. Phase 3, which was very important, we assigned very ambitious objective to this company, coming from a negative EBITDA we assigned an objective of 7% of EBITDA in 2007, 10% for 2008, which is for some activities very low, but for an automotive supplier in West Europe, very high. Trust me. All the company will be focused on 10 strategic objectives, and a new organization was put in place. I changed almost half of the direction committee, and I put in place a new organization, and we had a weekly review of the commercial results, which is very important because, as I explained in the beginning, we had a very, very, very big problem on the top line, which was decreasing from 200 million to 180 million around, and which is a pity in this kind of a job. And in addition, we launched 7 projects, a headcount reduction, a social plan of about 300 people out of 1,600, which is a tough social plan in Brittany. An industrial productivity system plan, so fast reduction, subcontracting of all activities which are not on the core of the company, and restructuring the Polish plan, because we had a Polish plan working for us, but also for the previous shareholder, which was a mess, and also an IT and quality certification project. At the end of the day, 18 months after the launch of this plan, we are on budget, slightly ahead in France, slightly behind in Poland, but we will deliver 7% EBITDA in 2007, and the company is now on track to prepare its future. As far as the strategic priorities are concerned, we develop partnerships outside France. You know that in the automotive industry, the work is going to low-cost countries. So we achieve partnership in China, in India, in Brazil. We develop the business outside PSA, which is mandatory, with Renault, with the German car makers. And also we are working with our shareholder to reach the critical mass, which is also a problem. We are too small, and we are working on possible acquisition. Excuse me? Almost finished. We have stopped the top line decrease, and we prepare the next year budget with a low turnover, but the year after we will have a growth. Just me summarize by giving you what I consider as a key success factor. First of all, in such a crisis, you have to understand very clearly the fundamental reason of the crisis. If you miss that, you can launch something which are not in the heart of the problem. You have to build an ambitious but realistic business plan. You have to explain this business plan to all the stakeholders, the customers, the suppliers, all the mairie, prefecture, and so on. Everybody which are around the company, you have to explain clearly what you want to do and why you are doing that. You have to align the objective with the shareholders. You must, in such a crisis, you cannot have any kind of difference between your objective and the shareholder objectives. And then you have to address all the dimensions of the company, especially the basics, the top line, the purchasing, the industrial organization, everything, the headcount, and so on. All the basics you have to address. You have to adapt the management team, because very often the management team is in this crisis situation because the people are not adapted to such a situation. And you have to take specialists in addition to the management team, and you have to execute the plan as rapidly as possible. And 18 months is, to my opinion, the right duration. And always keep in mind that after the crisis management, you have to prepare the last phase of the next phase, which is a normal phase. You have to give the company to long-term management. And it's not only an intermediate period, it's the preparation, also the preparation for the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this case study. But you know, while preparing the presentation of Monsieur Tejara, we have asked ourselves some question: how do we really manage this crisis? And is it up to manage this crisis, or we have to ask for extra forces? We have to ask for crisis management teams. And if we do have to do it, when should we ask for this help? And I think Mr. Tejara, he will share his point of view on these questions. Yeah.
Okay, merci. Bonjour, hello. First of all, just as a reminder, we've been, for the past 15 years, operating partners and strategic advisors to investment funds, essentially in the work of turnaround projects. Talking about crisis management from a generic standpoint, it was important to remind of the fact that turning around and managing crisis is a succession of very complicated processes. The preparation process is probably the most essential, as everyone knows. Although, when I say everyone knows, I'm not sure that everyone always takes it into consideration. Due diligences, for instance, as it was mentioned before, are usually done on the basis of financials, on the basis of legal, on the basis of constructions, complex constructions sometimes, mezzanine and so on. But very rarely do we see due diligences on the process, the added values, contribution directly from the different plants, for instance, if it's an industry, or, of course, the human resources side of it. And just to give you an example, recently, I think it was less than a year ago, maybe a little bit more, we were involved in a company that was dealing with fresh goods. And after a very short while, the crisis was immense. Some of the goods were disappearing, and the cash as well. And investments had been made in fairly high volumes to this company by very well-known bankers. Some of them are probably in this room. And we found out in 24 hours that the number 2 person had been involved with spending 15 years in jail. And the number 3 person who held a good percentage of the sales contracts had been convicted for murder about 22 years before. I just could not get over that. Very nice people with nice suits going into spending millions of euros, not knowing who they are actually entrusting their funds to. That's just an example, and I hope that the people that will recognize themselves in the room do not hold me to that. Another point in the preparation process is, of course, the fact that you will see during that preparation process all the elements that you will base yourself to secure the business. Now, what that means is that you're going to have to identify the true leaders within the company. Now, to take into consideration another type of company, big business, also in the fresh good business, the true leaders in the company were the delivery people. Now, there is no way we could have found that out just from the outside. Here is a 120 million euro company. So not a very large company, but not that small either. And pretty much all the company volume and profitability depended upon the delivery people. So the study of the process is a key element to secure later on your investment. Also, dealing about crises, of course, involves that securing process in order to re-establish the vital functions of the company as soon as you've arrived. You've heard my predecessor saying that they were awarded by the tribunal the company, and the next morning there's an IT war, everything is shut down. I've had the same problem in a company that some of you might know called Locatel, when I bought it for the investment fund Platina at the tribunal. The next morning we had guards across our ways. We could not enter the company, and all of the IT systems were shut down. Well, I'm sure that you had planned that. I'm sure that you were aware that that was going to happen. And that's part of both the preparation process and the securing process. The implementation process, of course, deals with putting everybody within the company back to work. The main problem in a company facing crisis is that people start to talk, and the more they talk, the less they work. The less they work, the less the added value is contributing to the general profitability of the company. So putting people back to work when there is no IT, when there are dogs outside the offices that are held by vigilante, all that is not that easy and that simple. Therefore, we believe that to each his own work. Local managers, it's obvious that we ought to lean against the local managers to actually perform their daily businesses, and they have to lean against us to actually protect them from the crisis in itself. So all of this is an equilibrium process in which pretty much business is handled by, and the everyday business is handled by the local managers, and crisis management is handled by the crisis managers. Again, and probably in a little bit more detail, preparation process, you identify the added values. This is a key element at IEN, my company. We have gathered, created, or put a name to a concept of social flow. We believe that the accumulated added values in the company ought to be positive in order to have a positive cash flow. Now, that sounds fairly simple until you realize that within the company, when you analyze the process and the organizational process of all the added values, you actually have people with negative added values in the company. That is a key element in your preparation. Phase 2 is to identify, of course, all implicated actors. Now, some of them you will be able to rely on. Some of them will fight you to death because they think that that's where their own interest is going to lie. Obviously, through an analysis of their goals and objectives, you might show that they actually fit the global viewpoint and therefore make them become contributors. Phase 3 is obviously to adapt and to realize that you will have against you or for you external forces or internal forces. And those environmental necessities deal with people. And you say people, people, people when you came into the room. I can only stress the importance of that, because otherwise your investments will never get repaid.
If you allow me a joke, which is not a joke, I would say, actually it's not people, it's décideur, décideur, décideur. And that's not just advertising, but that was a little bit of advertising and a little bit of food for thought.
Well, I think it's important, as you say, to make sure that professionalism is around the corner at each single decision that is going to be made. Do not improvise unless you have thoroughly prepared, minutely prepared different alternatives. And then it's no longer improvisation, it's decision making. So these are items that, in my mind, define crisis management. Now, control process is obviously a very important matter. Introducing the new players to manage the crisis is a control or part of the control process. Usually, as part of the preparation, we've been involved way before the thing happens, the event happens. And I think my predecessor, in his case, probably had some dealings with the key people way prior the tribunal decision. So, again, using professional to manage crisis, and that's not just advertisement, it's reality, and using locals to manage and stay focused on the business, that is also a key to turnaround. Second part is defining the new rules for cash management. The same way as we say people, 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 maybe in our own different ways, I'll say cash, 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 because working capital is obviously a key element. And usually it is very rare that the same people that will actually deal with the everyday business will also deal with the cash management resources. And therefore, it is extremely important to limit, and that's one of the first steps of the controlling process, to limit the number of people that can actually commit financially the company.
Actually, you didn't put cash, you put cash management. Management is people.
That's right. Thanks again. So, also, please stick with set rules no matter what. If the way to manage the cash has been set according to a certain number of rules, do not start to modify them. You will lose instant credibility at that point. And I see a bunch of companies that go into turnaround businesses and they start with set and fixed rules, and after just a few weeks it starts to delete. Soon the business will delete as well. Structuring the communication both internally and externally is an extremely important item, and we are firm believers that you have to use multi-level approach. First of all, do not leave to the unions or to the local leaders the monopoly of the exchange of information, because soon you will be out of the room where things happen. One other point is to give information. Again, some of my predecessors have talked about informing. We saw with your panel that it was very important to inform, to keep informed the implicated partners of what was going on. It's the same thing, considering that the people within the company are indeed the partners. With the control process, you have an action process. And that's also a key element, is make decision, do not wait for existential debates. Once you have your business plan set, once you have your objectives and your goals, you've probably planned the first, not 100 days, but the first 100 hours, hour by hour. What do we do if they refuse to let us get in to such and such plant? What happened if there start to be fighting? What happened? You know, we are very far from the nice, cozy atmosphere of this room, but that's the reality of turning around a company. People get, you know, to be taken hostages, and the Préfecture de Police will never intervene, because as soon as there is a union member in the room, it's considered to be a political aspect, and there is no way the Préfecture will allow the police to intervene, or the gendarmerie, or whatever. So what we're talking about here is to make sure that whatever decision you have to make, don't wait. Do them. Make them happen. Because there is only one thing that you have to have in mind, is only action will get you committed. Talk is cheap, as one says. Only action will get you success, and success goes to success, provided that it is well communicated both internally and externally. I think that right before the end of a management of crisis, what is important, obviously, and it's a point not to miss, is the transfer process. Now you have crisis managers that will have to transfer back the business to the people that will be charged with developing the company. Now those are two different jobs. I'm not capable of developing a company, but post-crisis, and that's the end of showing that the crisis has been managed to a positive side, you have to be able to transfer to a new and trusted management. This is all I wanted to say, so...
Thank you so much for the presentation.
Okay.
So I have 10 minutes to discuss crisis management from a legal perspective. I was there this morning, so and when you have a look at this slide, you know from the start that I'm not going to give you another overview of the French bankruptcy procedure. I mean, 10 minutes is not enough to do that, but 10 minutes is probably enough to spare the investors and the manager from making the mistake of the complete novice. I will essentially make 2 points. The first point is that French law offers a number of options to investors and managers, and good professionals should know them. The second point I will make is that the French law is not perfect, and I will take only one example, which is the privilege of new money under the conciliation procedure. So my first point is about the fact that it gives a lot of options to investors and managers. When it comes to a crisis, most of the time you have in mind the fact that you need to pay a substantial amount of money in a very limited period of time, and you need to breathe, and French law gives you a breathing space, and you have a couple of judicial proceedings which organize a stay of proceedings. That's the case for the safeguard procedure, and that's also the case for the turnaround procedure. And I will use another example, which is the ad hoc procedure. When it comes to a crisis, sometimes when you're a manager, you feel you are alone. But if you are in the automotive industry, for example, you know you're just not alone. I mean, it's just not your fault. And I think that French law gives you a fantastic opportunity to benefit from the help of very good professionals. And I mean, for example, in the case of the ad hoc procedure, the monetary ad hoc were always, often, I would say, the same people who could be appointed as administrator in the later procedure. These guys are really experts, like lawyers in negotiation. I mean, if you want to rediscuss your contract with Boeing, Renault, Peugeot, you can benefit from the help of this expert. For you, it's a lifetime experience, but for them, for us, it's typical, it's banal. So a good manager should have the guts to open the door of the bankruptcy court and to seek protection when it comes to a crisis, when they need protection. And the second point I could make on the ad hoc procedure is the fact that it will significantly decrease the liability of the manager. I mean, the court will know it, they will remember it, and they will appreciate it. Because if there is no turnaround, and when it comes to sanction and the appreciation of mistake of management, I mean, the fact that you have used all of the tools of the French regime, it's just good for you. You will have significantly decreased your liability. So my first point that it gives a lot of options. I will use the words of the US President Lyndon Johnson. You can apply the same words for a lot of situations. In fact, you use it for voting. But I think it's true for the adult procedure. You need to do it early and often. The second point I wanted to make, because I don't have a lot of time, is the fact that French law is not perfect. And the good example, and we have discussed that this morning, is the privilege of new money. I mean, we all know the rules. You want to act very early in the process. The legislator wants to make sure that you can inject cash when the company needs it. So to give a super priority to the investor, we have created this privilege of new money. The new money that ranks senior to all of debts which have arisen prior to the opening of the conciliation procedure. There are two exceptions to that rule, which is salaries and judicial proceedings. So if you have this perfect tool, I mean, the real question when you negotiate your conciliation agreement is for you, do you need the classic, the typical security package? Do you need collateral? Do you need pledges over the share? Do you need DAI, trade receivables? Do you need a pledge over the inventory? I mean, we have also heard this morning that now the law says that if you take disproportionate security, you are in one of the exceptions where you could be held liable as a creditor. And you can make the argument that benefiting from the privilege of new money and have a classic security package is something disproportionate. But I take the view, and I would recommend to an investor in new money to benefit from a typical security package. There are two good reasons. The first reason is the fact that if you don't have a pledge over the assets of the company, you could have stealing or dishonest manager who would sell the assets during the conciliation process. So you would benefit from the privilege of new money, but with a company with no assets. And when it comes to test the force of this privilege, in fact, you need to think in the worst case scenario, which is when the company is liquidated. And when the company is liquidated, you don't have to think in terms of your rank vis-à-vis the other creditors. You benefit from the privilege of the new money. You are one of the best creditors. But you need to think in terms of sell plan. Everybody knows the distinction between a safeguard plan or reorganization plan and sell plan. In the safeguard plan, in fact, the debtor will schedule the debt over a certain period of time. The maximum is 10 years. In the sell plan, in fact, there is no assumption of liabilities by the buyer. The bidders would just make an offer for buying assets. And because the key for the court is to save jobs, to save employment, the price could be very, very low. So in consideration for assuming all of the employment contracts, the bidder is going to propose a very, very low price to buy the assets. So if you have a privilege of new money over a purchase price of €1, well, you have just you have lost all your claim. There's a disconnect between the price of a sell plan and the price of your own claim. And the only possibility to have some leverage against not the other creditors, but a leverage against the other creditors is to have this typical classic security package. I give you one example. If you have a pledge over the inventory with a retention right, then the buyer of the business, the bidder for a sell plan, will be obliged to enter into a deal with the investor of new money Because if not, he won't get the inventory. If I have a right of retention, I will not give away my inventory unless I am paid for the full amount of my claim. If I have a privilege of new money, then of course I will be the first guy to get the price for the inventory. But if the bidder wants to pay €1 for the inventory, I will just get nothing. So that was my second point. So regardless of what is told you, I mean, you just need to make sure when you invest in new money that you benefit from the privilege of new money and you take a typical security package over the assets. It's not like belt and suspenders, but it's much better to have that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.